Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. Friends, today we are diving into the Battle of Naushera, a crucial episode from the First Indo-Pakistani War in 1948. The battle was all about control of key routes, strategic towns, and ultimately the region itself. Friends, here is what happened. Pakistani forces launched a series of intense attacks on Naushera, aiming to break through the disrupt Indian lines. But Indian army stood firm. They fought back with the determination, utilizing every resources, armored car, artillery, air support to repel the enemy. The battle was not just about defense, it was about strategy and resilience. Indian troops secured critical road networks, inflicted heavy losses on the enemy, and set the stage for future victories, including the recapture of Jhangar. Friends, the victory at Naushera was more than just a win on the ground. It was a powerful statement of India's resolve to defend its territory at all cost. So let's delve into how this battle unfolded. Friends, today we'll delve into the pivotal chapter of India's military history, that is the Battle of Naushera, that took place between January and February 1948. This battle expertly detailed in the book History of Operation by S.N. Prasad and Dharampal, which was a critical moment during the early days of Kashmir conflict. So what happened at Naushera? Ladies and gentlemen, picture this. The newly independent India still finds its footing, faced an imminent threat. Pakistani forces, bolstered by the tribal militias, launched a fierce attack on the strategically vital town of Naushera in Jammu and Kashmir. The stakes were high. Losing Naushera could have meant a significant setback for Indian forces in the region. But this is where the story takes a dramatic turn. Indian troops under the leadership of Brigadier Muhammad Usman stood their ground with remarkable courage and tenacity. And despite facing a well-coordinated assault, they managed to repel the attackers, inflicting heavy losses and securing a crucial victory for India. What is truly remarkable, as Prasad and Dharampal pointed out, is the sheer grit and resilience displayed by the Indian forces. They were not just fighting for a piece of land, they were defending the honor and integrity of newly sovereign nation. The Battle of Naushera was not just another military engagement. It was a symbol of India's determination to stand firm against aggression. And this battle also highlighted the importance of leadership, strategy, and morale in warfare. Friends, Brigadier Usman became the national hero, remembered not just for his tactical brilliance but for his undying commitment to his country. The Battle of Naushera was more than a military victory. It was a powerful statement. India would protect its territory and its people against all odds. And that, my friend, is the story of courage and resilience. A story that continues to inspire us today. So let's start. Ladies and gentlemen, in this video, we'll take you through the key moments of the Battle of Naushera, a crucial episode in the First Indo-Pakistan War of 1948. We'll start with an introduction to the significance of Naushera and the preliminary skirmish that set the stage for the conflict. Next, we'll explore the struggle for the line of communication where both sides fought fiercely to control vital supply routes. We'll then move on to the enemy attack on Naushera on January 6, 1948, and then how the Indian forces responded with a strategic reorganization and vigilant patrols to monitor and counter enemy movements. We'll discuss the offensive operations aimed at dislodging enemy positions and major engagements that took place, highlighting the intensity and the challenge of the battle. And finally, we'll look at the outcome of the battle, where the Indian defense inflicted heavy casualty on the enemy, and conclude with the significance of this decisive victory for India in maintaining control over the region. So welcoming everyone, again those who have joined it right now. Friends, today we are diving into the crucial chapter of Indian military history, the Battle of Naushera, fought in the early month of 1948. But before we get into the details of this intense battle, let's talk about the key events that set the stage for everything that followed. The capture of Jhangar on December 24, 1947. Now you might wonder, why was Jhangar so important? Well, picture this. Jhangar was not just any location. It was a strategic stronghold with access to a critical road network in Jammu and Kashmir. When Pakistani forces took over Jhangar, they gained unopposed access to this road network. Imagine this road network as a veins and arteries of the body. It was essential for moving troops and supplies, and with Jhangar in his hand, the enemy could easily maneuver and plan for the attacks on key locations, including Naushera. This capture was a game changer. It gave Pakistani forces a significant advantage, allowing them to move freely and prepare for the next phase of their campaign. It also meant that the Indian army had to act quickly and decisively to prevent further advances. They knew that losing Naushera could cut off vital supply lines and severely compromise their positions in the region. So why are we talking about this? Because understanding the capture of Jhangar helped us to grasp the urgency and intensity of the battle that followed at Naushera. The stakes were incredibly high, and the Indian army was up against a well-prepared enemy. This was not just a fight for a piece of land, it was a fight for control over a strategic network that could change the course of conflict. Stay with me as we explore how the events unfolded in Naushera, the strategies employed by both sides, and the courageous stand taken by the Indian troops to defend their land and honor. Ladies and gentlemen, now that we understand the significance of Jhangar capture, let's talk about the ripple effect it had on the region. The capture of Jhangar was not just about gaining control over town. It was a strategic move that had serious consequences for the Indian forces. By seizing Jhangar, Pakistani forces did not just gain unopposed access to the crucial road network. They also positioned themselves to threaten Poonch, a key town held by India. Imagine Poonch as a vital fortress on the map, strategically important not just for its location but also for maintaining Indian control over the region. With Jhangar under this control, the Pakistani forces were now in a perfect position to launch attacks and exert pressure on the Poonch. They could cut off supply lines, isolate the town, and make life extremely difficult for the Indian troops stationed there. The threat to Poonch was not just a military concern. It was a significant strategic challenge that could have led to a domino effect, weakening Indian control over the entire region of Jammu and Kashmir. So what does this mean? It means that capture of Jhangar changed the dynamics of the conflict. It was not just a loss of territory, it created a direct and immediate threat to other key positions held by India. The Indian forces had to quickly adapt their strategies, reinforce their defenses, and prepare for an enemy that now had a considerable tactical advantage. And this move by Pakistani forces demonstrated the high stakes and an intense chess game that was unfolding in this region. It showed just how quickly the balance of power could shift with the capture of strategic locations like Jhangar, putting Indian held towns like Poonch directly in the crosshairs of the enemy. Now let's shift our focus to the India's response. After the capture of Jhangar, the urgency to reclaim it became a top priority of Indian army. And for good reason, you see, regaining control of Jhangar was not just about recapturing lost territory. It was a strategic necessity to secure the Mirpur-Poonch road, a vital lifeline that connected key Indian held in the Jammu and Kashmir. Why was this road so important? Imagine it is a major highway in the city. It is not just a route, it is a backbone of movement of troops, supplies and communication. And with Jhangar in enemy hand, the Mirpur-Poonch road was vulnerable to Pakistani control, which would allow them to cut off these essential supply lines and isolate Indian positions even further. India could not afford to lose this critical route. Pakistani advances from Jhangar was not just threatening the town of Poonch but also jeopardizing the stability of the entire region. Friends, regaining Jhangar was crucial to halt these advances and ensure that Indian forces could maintain the foothold in the area. This situation created a sense of urgency for the Indian military. They needed to act fast and decisively. Reclaiming Jhangar meant reasserting control over the region's logistics and securing the path to Punch. It was about stopping the enemy's momentum and preventing further encroachment into Indian-held territory. So, the mission to recapture Jhangar was not just a military operation. It was a strategic imperative. The stakes were incredibly high. It was a fight to regain lost ground and a battle to protect a broader strategic interest of India in Jammu and Kashmir. This urgency is what led to the fierce and determined effort by Indian Army to turn the tide back in their favor. Let's move on to what happened next, the preliminary skirmish around Naushera. As we delve deeper into the crucial phase, it is essential to understand the situation on the ground. The Pakistani forces, after capturing Jhangar, did not just stop there. They quickly moved to establish strong defensive positions around the strategic town of Naushera. Now, why was Naushera so important? Think of Naushera as a critical gateway in this conflict. Holding Naushera meant controlling the routes that connected various parts of Jammu and Kashmir. And for Indian Army, maintaining control of the Naushera was essential to ensure the security of the region and prevent further enemy advances. But the Pakistani forces were well aware of this. They fortified their positions around Naushera, creating a defensive ring that was both robust and challenging to break. Friends, these positions were strategically chosen to maximize their ability to defend and counter any attempt by the Indian forces to reclaim lost ground. And this setup posed a significant threat to the Indian control in the region, making it clear that major confrontations was imminent. The initial skirmish was like a game of chess, with each side testing the other defenses and trying to gain an advantage. For the Indian Army, the challenge was clear. They needed to break through these well-entrenched positions to secure Naushera and safeguard the vital route that were crucial for maintaining the hold over Jammu and Kashmir. The skirmish around Naushera were more than just small clashes. They were a precursor to the larger battle that was about to unfold, a battle that would determine who would have the upper hand in his critical region. It was a tense and dangerous time, with both sides preparing for the inevitable showdown that was just around the corner. Now moving on, let's talk about the next critical phase of the operation around Naushera, the Indian probing attack. After realizing the strength of Pakistani defensive positions around this key town, the Indian Army knew that they had to be strategic about the next moves. Charging in without a plan would have been risky, and the stakes were far too high for any miscalculation. So what did the Indian troops do? They conducted a series of probing attacks. These were not full-scale assault, but rather tactical maneuver designed to test the enemy defenses. Think of it like filling out an opponent's strategy in a game of chess. Understanding where their defenses were strongest and identifying potential weak points. These probing attacks were crucial. They allowed the Indian forces to gather vital intelligence on the enemy defensive setup and how they were positioned, where they were most fortified, and importantly, where their vulnerabilities lay. Every skirmish, every clash gave the Indian Army more information and a better understanding of what they were up against. Friends, by systematically probing the enemy lines, the Indian troops could develop a clearer picture of the battlefield. And this intelligence was invaluable for planning a larger offensive. They were not just looking to break through defenses, they were preparing to dismantle them strategically, ensuring that when the time came for the full-scale attack, it would be precise and effective. And this phase of probing was not just about direct confrontation. It was about outsmarting the enemy, using every opportunity to learn and adapt. The Indian army knew that to reclaim Naushera and push back the Pakistani forces, they would need more than just courage and firepower. They needed strategy and preparation, and these probing attacks laid the groundwork for major offensive that was to come. Now let's move to the critical turning point in the conflict, the repelled attack on Naushera. After establishing a strong defensive position around the town, the Pakistani forces were determined to capture Naushera. They knew that seizing this strategic location would give them a significant advantage in the region. So they launched multiple attacks, each one aimed at breaking through Indian defenses and capturing the town. But here is where the story takes a dramatic turn. Despite their best effort and numerous attempts, the Pakistani forces were unable to penetrate the Indian defenses. Each attack was met with fierce resistance. The Indian troops, well prepared and fortified, stood their ground and fought back with everything they had. The result? Pakistani forces suffered heavy casualties in these failed assaults. The defenders of Naushera under leadership of Brigadier Muhammad Usman displayed remarkable courage and resilience. They not only managed to hold their positions but also inflicted significant losses on the attacking forces. And these repelled attacks were more than just a series of failed attempts by the enemy. They were a testament to the strength and determination of the Indian army. And despite being outnumbered and facing a relentless enemy, the Indian troops managed to maintain control of Naushera, a town that was crucial for the defense of the entire region. Friends, by holding Naushera, the Indian forces were able to secure a key strategic point and prevent further advances by the enemy. It was a significant victory that showcased the Indian Army's ability to defend its territory and repel aggression, no matter how intense the pressure. The failure of Pakistani forces to capture Naushera, despite repeated attempts, was a major setback for them. It not only weakened their positions but also boosted the morale of the Indian troops, setting the stage for the next phase of the conflict. Friends, the Battle of Naushera was far from over, but these repelled attacks marked a turning point, highlighting the resilience and determination of the Indian forces to protect their land. Let's now focus on another crucial aspect of the battle, the struggle for the line of communication. Friends, this was not just about holding territory, it was also about ensuring the lifelines of the war, that is supply routes and the line of communication, remained intact and under control. The Naushera-Berry-Patan road was one such critical lifeline, and for the Indian forces, this road was essential for transporting supplies, reinforcements and moving troops effectively across the region. Control over this road meant maintaining the flow of essential resources, which was crucial for sustaining the defense of Naushera and other strategic areas. But the Pakistani forces understood this all too well. They knew that by cutting off these key routes, they could severely disrupt Indian supply lines and hamper troop movement. If they could control or even sever the Naushera-Berry-Patan road, it would isolate the Indian forces, leaving them vulnerable and cutting them off from the reinforcement and supplies they desperately needed. So they made several attempts to do just that, attacking key points along this road in an effort to choke off the Indian assaults and create chaos behind the front lines. These were not just a random assault, they were calculated moves aimed at weakening the Indian army ability to sustain its operation in the region. But the Indian forces were not about to let this happen. Understanding the critical importance of this route, they mounted a fierce defense, repelling enemy attacks and ensuring that the road remained open. The struggle for the Naushera-Berry-Patan road was intense and relentless, with both sides recognizing that control over these lines of communication could very well decide the outcome of the broader conflict. The battle for the line of communication was not just about strategic positioning, it was about survival. The ability to maintain this road was a testament to the determination and the tenacity of the Indian army. And despite the enemy's repeated attempt to disrupt their supply lines, they managed to keep the roads open, ensuring that their force remained well supplied and ready to fight. In the end, the defense of the Naushera-Berry-Patan road was a crucial factor in maintaining Indian control over the region. It demonstrated the importance of logistics and communication in warfare and highlighted the length to which the Indian army would go to protect its vital lifelines. Now let's talk about how Indian army responded to this critical threat to their line of communication. After the Pakistani forces made several attempts to cut off the Naushera-Berry-Patan road, it became clear to the Indian commanders that decisive action was needed. This road was not just important, it was essential for their operation, and losing it could have spelled disaster for their defensive effort in the region. So what did the Indian army do? They launched a series of robust operations to secure the road and remove any enemy obstacles. Strong Indian columns were sent out with a clear mission: open the road, remove any enemy roadblocks, and ensure the safe passage of supplies and troops. This was no small task. The road was heavily contested, with enemy forces doing everything they could block it and create choke points. But Indian troops were determined. These operations were not just about clearing the path, they were about demonstrating to the enemy that India was fully committed to the maintaining control over its vital line of communication. The Indian column pushed forward with great resolve, facing fierce resistance but never backing down. They knew that securing the road was critical to the overall success of their mission and in Jammu and Kashmir. And their determination paid off. Despite the enemy's best effort, the Indian troops managed to open the road and clear it of any obstructions. They removed enemy roadblocks and secured key positions along the route, ensuring that supplies could flow freely and troops could move without hindrance. These operations to secure the Naushera-Berry-Patan road were a testament to the Indian Army's strategic planning and unyielding determination. They understood that control over this road was not just about logistics. It was about sending a clear message: India would not be pushed back. They would defend every inch of their territory, maintaining their supply lines and continue to fight with strength and resilience. And in the end, these efforts to secure the road were crucial in maintaining the momentum of Indian forces, ensuring that they had resources and flexibility needed to keep up the fight and defend their positions in Naushera and beyond. Let's move to a significant victory in this conflict: the successful clearing of Naushera-Berry-Patan road. Friends, by January 10th, the Indian forces had achieved what they set out to do. They successfully cleared this vital road, ensuring that it remained open and secure. And this was no easy feat. The Naushera-Berry-Patan road was a critical line of communication, essential for moving supplies and reinforcement across the region. Friends, Pakistani forces were keenly aware of its importance and made several determined attempts to cut this lifeline. They wanted to disrupt Indian supply lines and isolate the troops defending Naushera. But the Indian army was not about to let that happen. In response, the Indian troops launched a series of aggressive operations to clear the road. They moved swiftly and with precision, overcoming enemy roadblocks and pushing back the forces attempting to sever this critical route. The operations were tough, with intense fighting and significant challenges, but Indian forces displayed incredible tenacity and skill. By January 10th, their efforts had paid off. The road was cleared and the enemy attempt to cut off this line of communication were thwarted. And this was a huge blow to the Pakistani forces, who had hoped to weaken Indian positions by cutting off their supplies. Instead, they found themselves unable to disrupt the Indian lines, with their own positions now increasingly vulnerable. The successful clearing of the Naushera-Berry-Patan road was more than just a tactical victory. It was a clear demonstration of Indian army resilience and determination to defend their territory and maintain control over key strategic routes. It ensured that Indian forces could continue to receive the supplies and reinforcements they needed to hold their ground and keep fighting. This operation was a critical moment in the Battle of Naushera. Friends, by keeping this vital road open, the Indian army not only secured a key supply lines but also dealt a significant blow to the enemy morale. It showed that despite all attempts to disrupt their operation, the Indian forces were firmly in control and ready to fight their land against any threat. Now let's turn to a crucial day in the Battle of Naushera, January 6, 1948. Ladies and gentlemen, on this day, the Pakistani forces launched a significant assault on the town of Naushera. But before they made their main move, they employed a clever strategy to try and throw the Indian defense off balance. The enemy launched diversionary attack from northwest and southwest, aiming to distract the Indian forces and weaken their defense around Naushera. These feints were carefully planned. The idea was simple: create confusion and spread the Indian troops thin, forcing them to divide their attention and resources across multiple fronts. So, ladies and gentlemen, by attacking from the northwest and southwest, the Pakistani forces hoped to pull Indian troops away from the primary defensive positions, making it easier for the concentrated attack to break through elsewhere. It was a classic tactics designed to exploit any gaps or weaknesses that might appear when forces are stretched too thin. But Indian army was prepared. The Indian troops defending Naushera were not easily fooled. And despite the diversionary tactic, they maintained their focus and held their ground. The Indian commanders quickly recognized that these feints were what they were, a ploy to draw them away from the main action. They responded with discipline, refusing to overextend their line of or abandon their critical positions. As a result, the diversionary attack failed to achieve their intended effect. The Indian defense around Naushera remained strong and cohesive, ready to repel any direct assault. The enemy's attempt to weaken the Indian positions through these feints were effectively neutralized, and their plan to break through by creating chaos and confusion fell flat. This day marked a significant moment in the battle. The Indian army ability to see through the enemy tactics and maintain a strong, unified defense was a key factor in their success. It showed not only their tactical acumen but also their determination to protect Naushera at all cost. The failed feint from the northwest and southwest highlight the resilience and the strategic awareness of the Indian forces, who stood ready to face whatever came next. Following the diversionary attack from the northwest and southwest, the Pakistani forces launched their main assault on Naushera from the northeast. And this was the heart of their strategy on January 6, 1948, and they executed it with full force. Friends, to pave a way for the major offensive, the enemy began with heavy sniping and shelling. This was not just random fire, it was a calculated attempt to soften the Indian defenses. The shelling was intense, aimed at weakening Indian positions and causing confusions and lowering the morale of the troops stationed there. It was a classic tactics designed to inflict maximum damage and create opportunities for the infantry to break through. As the shelling intensified, Pakistani snipers targeted key Indian positions, further destabilizing the defenders and making it difficult for them to respond effectively. The aim was to keep the Indian forces pinned down, unable to regroup or counterattack. Then, once they believed the Indian defenses were sufficiently weakened, the Pakistani infantry moved in for the main assault. And this was the moment they had been building up to: an all-out push to break through the Indian lines and capture Naushera. They advanced with determination, leveraging the earlier shelling and sniping to gain an advantage. But the Indian army was prepared for this. Despite the heavy bombardment and intense pressure from snipers, they held their ground. The troops defending Naushera had been fortified and well positioned, ready to meet this attack head on. They responded with a fierce and coordinated defense using their knowledge of the terrain and their strong defensive positions to repel the assault. Friends, the main attack from the northeast was met with resilience and determination by the Indian forces. And despite the heavy shelling and sniping, they managed to hold their positions, inflicting significant casualties on the attacking forces. And this was a testament to their preparedness and their resolve to defend Naushera at all cost. In the end, the Pakistani forces were unable to break through. Their main assault from the northeast, despite its intensity and initial advantage gained through shelling and sniping, was successfully repelled. The Indian Army ability to withstand this major offensive showcased their strength and determination, proving once again that they had more than capable of defending their land against any threat. Now let's talk about the fierce Indian defense that turned the tide during the Battle of Naushera. When the main Pakistani assault came from the northeast, the Indian force did not just stand their ground. They fought back with everything they had. The Indian troops in Naushera were well prepared and determined to hold their positions. They utilized a combination of armored cars, artillery, and air support to repel the enemy's attack. And this was not just a defensive maneuver, it was a coordinated and powerful response to an intense assault. Armored cars played a crucial role in their defense. These vehicles provided both mobility and firepower, allowing Indian forces to maneuver effectively across the battlefield while delivering devastating blows to the advancing enemy. The armored cars were particularly effective in countering the infantry assault, breaking up the enemy formation and forcing them to retreat. Similarly, artillery support was another key element in the Indian defense. Friends, well-placed artillery positions rained shells on the attacking forces, creating chaos and inflicting significant casualties. The artillery units were precise and relentless, targeting enemy positions with accuracy and helping to disrupt the momentum of the assault. And let's not forget that air support. The Indian forces played a vital role in the battle, providing aerial recce and delivering strikes against enemy concentrations. This air support was crucial in spotting enemy movement and providing real-time intelligence, which allowed the ground force to adapt quickly to the changing battlefield dynamics. Together, these elements created a formidable defense that the Pakistani forces could not overcome. And despite the initial advantage and intensity of their assault, they were met with a wall of resistance. The Indian forces not only held their ground but also inflicted heavy casualties on the enemy, blunting their attack and forcing them to withdraw. This fierce defense was a turning point in the battle. It demonstrated the Indian Army capability to coordinate across different branches and utilize all available resources to protect their positions. The combination of armored car, artillery, and air support was a game changer, showcasing the strength and determination of the Indian forces in Naushera. In the face of well-planned and aggressive enemy assault, the Indian troops showed remarkable bravery and tactical acumen, proving that they were more than capable of defending their territory and pushing back against any adversary. Moving next, following the fierce battle and successful repulsion of enemy's attack, the Indian forces around Naushera knew that they could not rest on their laurels. And to ensure the safety of Naushera and maintain control over the critical road network, they undertook a crucial phase of reorganization and consolidation. Friends, after the intense fighting, the Indian troops quickly moved to consolidate their defensive positions around Naushera. And this was a strategic move to secure not just the town itself, but the vital road network that connected Naushera to other key areas. By strengthening their defenses, the Indian army aimed to deny the enemy any opportunity to regroup and launch further advances. The consolidation involved several key actions. The Indian forces fortified their positions, building strong defensive lines and improving their fortifications. They set up well-coordinated patrols to monitor enemy movement and prevent any surprise attack. And these patrols were vital for maintaining a constant watch on the enemy and ensuring that the area remained secure. In addition, the Indian troops worked on enhancing their logistical setup to ensure the supplies and reinforcements could be moved quickly if needed. And this not only strengthened their current position but also prepared them for any future operations. The consolidation effort were more about than just defense. They were about creating a robust, unbreakable presence that could withstand any enemy attempt to reclaim lost ground. Friends, by securing Naushera and its surrounding areas, the Indian army effectively denied the enemy any chance to advance further. The well-coordinated reorganization and consolidation of positions ensured that the enemy could not exploit any weaknesses or gap in the defenses. It was a clear message that Naushera, along with its strategic road network, was firmly in Indian hands. And this phase of consolidation was a crucial part of overall strategy to maintain control over the region. It showcased that the Indian army foresight and tactical acumen, understanding that holding a position was not just about repelling attacks but also about preparing for what comes next. The effective consolidation around Naushera highlighted the Indian forces' ability to adapt quickly and strengthen their grip on the critical area, ensuring that the enemy had no room to maneuver. Friends, after successfully repelling the enemy assault and consolidating their positions around Naushera, the Indian forces understood the importance of staying alert and prepared for any potential threats. This led to a strategic approach of light patrolling in the region, a crucial tactic aimed at keeping the enemy in check without overextending the troops. And these light patrols were not about engaging in heavy combat or provoking further battles. Instead, the Indian troops conducted limited operations to closely monitor enemy movement and maintain constant vigilance. By doing so, they ensured that any attempt by the enemy to regroup or launch surprise attack would be quickly identified and countered. The idea was simple yet effective. Keep a watchful eye on the enemy, gather intelligence, and stay prepared for any changes on the battlefield. And this approach allowed the Indian forces to maintain a strong defensive posture while avoiding unnecessary escalation. They understood that conserving their combat strength was essential, especially when facing a determined adversary who could strike at any moment. And by conducting these light patrols, the Indian army effectively maintained a balance between vigilance and caution. They avoided direct confrontation that could deplete their resources and instead focused on preserving their combat strength for future engagement. This strategy of caution observation ensured that Indian forces remained ready to respond swiftly and effectively if the situation demanded. The light patrolling operations also served another critical purpose. They kept the morale of troops high. Knowing that they were actively monitoring the enemy and protecting their positions instilled confidence and readiness among the Indian soldiers. It was a constant reminder that they were in control and prepared to defend their land at all cost. In essence, these light patrolling efforts were about maintaining a strategic advantage. And by keeping the enemy under close watch, without engaging in unnecessary skirmishes, the Indian army was able to preserve its strength and readiness, setting the stage for any future operation that might be needed to secure the region fully. This approach demonstrated that their tactical acumen and commitment to defending Naushera and its surrounding area, no matter what challenges lay ahead. Following the initial setback and the fierce defense put up by the Indian forces, the Pakistani troops knew that they could not give up on their objective to capture Naushera. This strategic town was too important, and losing it would mean a significant blow to their campaign in the region. So they regrouped and began extensive preparation for another major assault. The Pakistani forces took this time to reinforce their positions, understanding that a hasty attack would not succeed against the well-prepared Indian defense. They carefully regrouped their troops, bringing in fresh reinforcement to bolster their ranks and replace the losses they had suffered in previous engagements. But it was not just about manpower. The Pakistani forces also focused on logistics, stockpiling supplies and ammunition to ensure that they were ready for a sustained assault. They knew that to have any chance of success in capturing Naushera, they needed to be fully equipped and prepared for prolonged combat. And this preparation involved setting up supply lines and ensuring that their troops had enough resources to withstand counterattacks and maintain pressure on the Indian positions. These preparations were not taken lightly. The Pakistani commanders were aware that Indian army was vigilant and prepared, having successfully repelled their earlier attempts. As a result, they planned meticulously, hoping that a well-coordinated and well-supported attack could break the Indian defense and finally bring Naushera under their control. The buildup of troops, supplies and ammunition signaled to a clear intent. The Pakistani forces were gearing up for a renewed and a determined effort to seize Naushera. They aimed to strike with overwhelming force, leveraging their regrouped and reinforced positions to launch a decisive assault. For the Indian forces, this preparation by the enemy meant that they need to remain on high alert. They had to anticipate the coming attacks and be ready to respond with the same determination and resilience that had characterized their defense so far. In this tense standoff, both sides knew the importance of Naushera. The Pakistani preparation for another attack underscored the strategic value of the town and high stakes involved in this conflict. It was clear that the battle for Naushera was far from over, and both sides were bracing for the next round of intense fighting. Now let's turn to a decisive moment in the Indian Army's strategy during the Battle of Naushera, the offensive on Kot, which took place on 1st of February 1948. After successfully defending Naushera against multiple enemy assaults and recognizing the importance of taking the initiative, the Indian forces decided to go on the offensive. The target was a strategic town of Kot, a critical position held by the Pakistani forces. Friends, Kot was not just any town. It was a vital hub for the enemy supply lines and a key defensive position that supported their operations around Naushera. And capturing Kot would mean more than just taking another piece of land. It would disrupt the enemy's supply chain and significantly weaken their ability to sustain a prolonged fight in the region. The Indian commanders understood this perfectly. They knew that to maintain a momentum and secure Naushera, they needed to strike at the heart of the enemy logistical network. And by capturing Kot, the Indian forces aimed to cut off these crucial supply lines, making it harder for the Pakistani forces to regroup, resupply, and launch further attacks. On February 1st, the Indian Army launched a well-planned and a coordinated assault on Kot. The operation was swift and precise, leveraging the element of surprise and overwhelming force to break through the enemy's defenses. Indian troops moved in with determination, targeting key positions and pushing back the Pakistani forces who were caught off guard by the intensity and the speed of the attack. The offensive was a success. The capture of Kot delivered a severe blow to the Pakistani supply lines, significantly hampering their ability to support their troops around Naushera. Friends, with their logistical network disrupted and their defensive positions compromised, the Pakistani forces found themselves in a much weaker position. The attack on Kot marked a turning point in the battle, and by taking the fight to the enemy and disrupting their operations, the Indian Army demonstrated its ability to not only defend its territory but also to conduct effective offensive. The capture of Kote was a strategic victory that showcased the Indian forces' resolve to protect their land and weaken the enemy's hold in the region. In the larger context of the Battle of Naushera, the attack on Kote was a crucial maneuver that shifted the momentum firmly in the favor of the Indian army. It underscored the importance of taking decisive action and highlighted the tactical acumen of the Indian commanders, who understood the value of disrupting the enemy's plan and maintaining the initiative on the battlefield. Now let's talk about the intense challenge faced by the Indian forces during their offensive on Kote. As the Indian patrols moved forward to capture this strategic town, they encountered fierce resistance from the Pakistani forces. The opposition was not just strong, it was relentless. The enemy was well prepared and they unleashed sustained shelling on the advancing Indian troops. And this barrage of artillery fire was not only aimed at halting the Indian advance but also at causing maximum confusion and disruption. The shelling was heavy and continuous, creating a deadly environment for the soldiers on the ground. Every step forward was met with a storm of explosion, making it incredibly difficult for the Indian forces to maintain their momentum. But that was not the only challenge. The Pakistani forces also employed highly effective sniping tactics. Snipers were strategically positioned to pick off Indian soldiers as they moved through the battlefield. And this accurate and deadly sniping added another layer of danger, targeting both advancing troops and those attempting to evacuate the wounded. The precision of these sniper attacks meant that any movement had to be carefully planned and executed, as even the slightest exposure could be fatal. For the Indian troops, advancing under such conditions was a formidable task. They had to navigate through a constant barrage of shell fire and deadly sniper attacks, while trying to push forward and achieve their objectives. Friends, evacuating the wounded became an incredibly perilous operation, with the risk of further casualties high at every turn. And despite these extreme challenges, the Indian forces showed remarkable resilience and courage. They adapted their tactics using whatever cover they could find and coordinating their move to minimize the exposure. Medics and support troops worked tirelessly to evacuate the wounded, often risking their own lives in the process. And this phase of battle highlighted the intensity of the conflict and determination of both sides. For the Indian army, it was a stark reminder of the enemy's capabilities and the harsh realities of the war. But it also underscored their unwavering commitment to their mission, pushing forward despite the heavy opposition and ensuring that every effort was made to maintain their offensive. In the end, heavy shelling and sniping could not break the resolve of the Indian troops. They pressed on, demonstrating once again their strength, bravery, and determination to secure their objective, no matter the odds. As the Indian forces pushed forward in their offensive to capture the strategic town of Kote, they faced not just determined enemy, but also a host of daunting challenges that made every step forward incredibly difficult. The combination of heavy enemy fire and challenging terrain created a perfect storm of obstacles that impeded their ability to advance and safely evacuate their casualties. First, let's talk about the heavy enemy fire. As the Indian troops moved forward, they were met with intense resistance from the Pakistani forces, who were deeply entrenched and prepared for a fierce defense. Sustained shelling and accurate sniping turned the battlefield into a deadly zone, with every inch of progress coming at a significant cost. The constant barrage of artillery fire and the threat of sniping attacks made it nearly impossible for the Indian forces to maintain their momentum. Every attempt to push forward was met with a hail of bullets and shrapnel, making it incredibly dangerous to move in the open. The enemy defensive positions were strategically located, maximizing their firepower and creating a network of deadly crossfires. This relentless enemy fire forced the Indian troops to take cover frequently and slowing down their advance, making it difficult to gain ground. Adding to these difficulties was a challenging terrain around Court. The landscape was rugged and unforgiving, filled with natural obstacles that further complicated the offensive. Navigating through this terrain under heavy fire was an immense challenge. The uneven ground, hills, and natural cover worked both as a shield and a trap, providing some protection from enemy fire but also slowing down movement and making coordinated assault incredibly difficult. Friends, these conditions also made the evacuation of wounded soldiers a perilous task. Under normal circumstances, evacuating the wounded is the top priority. But in this situation, every attempt to move the injured soldiers out of harm's way exposed both the wounded and the rescuer to further danger. The combination of heavy shelling, sniping, and difficult terrain meant that even the basic rescue operations became fraught with risk. Medics and support personnel had to navigate this deadly environment to reach the injured, often putting their own lives on the line. And this phase of battle underscored the immense challenge faced by the Indian forces during the offensive. It highlighted the harsh reality of combat in such conditions, where every decision had to balance the urgency of advancing with the need to protect the troops and evacuate the wounded. Despite this immense challenge, the Indian troops displayed incredible bravery and determination, pushing forward as best they could and doing everything possible to care for their comrades under fire. The difficulties in advancing and evacuating wounded soldiers were a stark reminder of complexity of the war, where the terrain, enemy fire, and ever-present threat to life all came together to create a challenging and unforgiving battlefield. Yet, even in the face of such adversity, the Indian force remained steadfast, demonstrating their resolve to achieve their objective no matter the cost. Let's now turn our attention to the pivotal series of engagement that took place between 8th and 10th of January, the clearing operation on the Naushera-Berry-Pattan road. This was a crucial operation for Indian forces, aimed at securing a vital line of communication that was essential for maintaining supply lines and troop movement in the region. The Naushera-Berry-Pattan road was not just any route, it was the lifeline that connected key strategic points, enabling the Indian Army to transport supplies, reinforcements, and troops swiftly across the battlefield. For the Indian forces, defending Naushera, keeping this road open was a top priority. The enemy, fully aware of its importance, was determined to cut off his vital artery, knowing that the disruption the supply lines could cripple the Indian defensive effort. And from January 8th to 10th, the Indian Army launched a series of clearing operations to secure this critical road. The mission was clear: remove any enemy roadblocks, neutralize hostile positions along the route, and ensure that the vital line of communication remained fully operational. These clearing operations were not easy. The enemy had positioned themselves along the road, prepared to launch ambush and set up roadblocks to disrupt Indian movement. The terrain added to the challenge, with sections of the road passing through difficult and strategically vulnerable areas. And despite these obstacles, the Indian troops pressed on with determination, knowing that the success of their overall strategy depended on keeping this road open. The Indian forces employed a combination of infantry, armored vehicle, and artillery to sweep the area and push back the enemy. They moved methodically, clearing out enemy positions and ensuring that the road was safe for the passage. This coordinated effort involved precise movement and quick action to respond to any enemy attempts to counterattack or re-establish the roadblock. Friends, by January 10th, the clearing operations had achieved their objectives. The Naushera-Berry-Pattan road was secured, denying the enemy any chance to disrupt this critical line of communication. And this success was a significant blow to the Pakistani forces, who had hoped to sever the supply lines and isolate the Indian troops defending Naushera. Securing the Naushera-Berry-Pattan road was more than just a tactical victory. It was a strategic triumph, that ensured that Indian army could continue to operate effectively in the region. And by maintaining control over this vital route, the Indian forces kept their supply lines intact, allowing them to sustain their defense and prepare for future engagement. In the broader context of the battle, these clearing operations highlighted the importance of logistics and mobility in warfare. They demonstrated the Indian Army ability to adapt and respond to the enemy tactics, ensuring that their force remained well supplied and capable of holding their ground. The success of these operations played a key role in maintaining the momentum of the Indian defense, keeping the pressure on the enemy and securing a critical advantage in the Battle of Naushera. Now let's move on to the another intense chapter in the Battle of Naushera, where the Indian forces conducted patrols to the area of Pathradi and Khaman Ghosa Gala from the 17th to the 19th of the January. These patrols were essential for the Indian army, as they aimed to monitor enemy movement and assess the strength of the Pakistani defensive positions. However, this mission would prove to be anything but straightforward. As Indian patrol advanced into these areas, they were met with fierce resistance from the enemy. The Pakistani forces, well aware of the strategic importance of Pathradi and Khaman Ghoshagala, were prepared to defend these positions vigorously. As a result, the Indian patrol faced intense enemy fire almost immediately upon entering those areas. The terrain in Pathradi and Khaman Ghoshagala was challenging, adding to the difficulties faced by the Indian troops. And navigating through this rough landscape under heavy fire was incredibly perilous. The Pakistani forces used their knowledge of terrain to their advantage, setting up strong defensive positions that allowed them to maximize their firepower and create formidable obstacles for the Indian patrols. The Indian troops, despite being under intense pressure, pushed forward with determination. Their mission was clear: to gather crucial intelligence on enemy positions and strength, which would be vital for the planning future operations. However, the enemy's fierce opposition made every step forward a struggle. The Pakistani forces launched continuous attack, employing both direct fire and well-placed snipers to hinder the Indian patrol's progress. This period of heavy fighting from January 17th to 19th was marked by intense skirmishes. The Indian patrol had to constantly adapt, finding cover wherever possible and using their own tactics to counter the enemy's aggressive defense. The objective was to avoid being drawn into the full-scale engagement while still achieving their recce goals. Friends, despite the heavy opposition and intense enemy fire, the Indian patrol managed to gather valuable information about the enemy's defensive capabilities in the Pathradi and Khaman Ghoshagala area. This intelligence was crucial for understanding the strength and disposition of Pakistani forces, helping to inform the Indian army strategic decision moving forward. These encounters underscored the challenges of conducting patrols in the hostile territory, especially against the well-prepared and determined enemy. The bravery and resilience of the Indian troops during these patrols highlighted their commitment to their mission, even in the face of significant danger and adversity. In the end, the heavy resistance faced by the Indian patrol during this period was a stark reminder of the tough fight they lay ahead. But it also demonstrated the Indian Army's resolve to push forward, gather critical intelligence, and prepare for the next phase of the battle. Friends, the action in the Pathradi and Khaman Ghoshagala set the stage for further operation, showing that the Indian forces were ready to face whatever challenges came their way. Let's now focus on the particularly challenging engagement in the Battle of Naushera, the Indian offensive to capture the strategic point 221. Friends, This operation was crucial for the Indian Army as Point 221 was a key position that dominated the surrounding area and provided a strategic advantage. However, this attempt would underline the formidable challenge of dislodging well-entrenched Pakistani forces. The Indian forces launched their offensive on Point 221 with the goal of securing this high ground, which was essential for gaining better control over the battlefield. And from the outset, the operation was met with fierce resistance. The Pakistani troops had fortified their positions, making full use of terrain to create strong defensive fortifications. And as the Indian soldiers advanced, they were immediately subjected to heavy enemy fire. The Pakistani forces, anticipating an attack, were prepared to defend Point 221 at all cost. They unleashed a relentless barrage of artillery and machine gun fire, aiming to halt the Indian advance in this track. The intensity of the enemy's fire was overwhelming, creating a deadly environment for the advancing Indian troops. As the battle raged on, it became clear that capturing Point 221 would not be easy. The Indian forces faced significant challenges not only from the heavy enemy fire but also due to the difficult terrain, which made maneuvering and coordinating their attack incredibly challenging. And despite their best effort and bravery, the Indian troops encountered fierce resistance that led to the substantial casualties. The situation on the ground grew increasingly dire, and under such intense enemy fire with mounting casualties, the Indian commanders had to make a tough decision. Recognizing the futility of continuing an assault under these conditions, they ordered a strategic withdrawal to preserve their remaining forces and regroup. The withdrawal from Point 221 was a sobering moment in this battle. It highlighted the difficulties of dislodging a well-prepared and entrenched enemy, especially in such challenging terrain. The failure to capture Point 221 was a setback, but it also underscored the harsh realities of combat and the complexities of military operations in such a volatile environment. This attempt on Point 221 demonstrated the determination and courage of Indian troops, even in the face of overwhelming odds. While they were forced to withdraw, their efforts were not in vain. The engagement provided valuable lessons and insight into the strength and strategy of Pakistani defenses, which would be crucial for planning future operations. Ultimately, friends, this battle for Point 221 served as a reminder of unpredictable nature of war and the need for adaptability and resilience. It showed that even when plans do not get as expected, the spirit and the resolve of Indian Army remain unwavering, always ready to learn, adapt, and fight another day. Finally, let's talk about the outcome of the Battle of Naushera, a crucial moment that marked a significant victory for the Indian forces. After days of intense fighting and multiple attempts by Pakistani forces to capture the strategic town of Naushera, the Indian troops stood their ground and delivered a decisive repulse. The Pakistani forces, determined to seize Naushera, launched a full-scale assault, hoping to break through the Indian defense and gain control of this key location. However, the Indian army was prepared for this challenge. Drawing on their experience and tactical acumen, they mounted a fierce defense that would prove to be a turning point in the battle. The Indian force utilized a combination of armored cars, artillery, and air support to repel the enemy's attack. The armored car providing mobility and firepower, allowing the Indian troops to respond quickly to the enemy advances and disrupt their formation. Similarly, artillery units played a crucial role in delivering precise and powerful strikes against enemy positions, creating chaos and inflicting significant damage. But perhaps one of the most decisive factors in the battle was the use of air support. The Indian Air Force was called into action, providing critical aerial recce and delivering targeted strikes against the attacking forces. This air support not only helped in identifying enemies' movement but also played a crucial role in demoralizing the attackers and breaking their momentum. The combination of these elements created a formidable defense. As the Pakistani forces pushed forward, they were met with overwhelming firepower from all directions. The coordinated response of the Indian army effectively blunted the enemy assault, causing heavy casualties and forcing the attackers to retreat. And the result was the decisive repulse of the Pakistani assault on Naushera. The enemy's failure to break through the Indian defense marked a turning point in the conflict. It was a significant victory of the Indian forces, who had not only defended Naushera but had also inflicted severe losses on the attacking forces. This outcome demonstrated the strength, resilience, and tactical prowess of the Indian army. And despite facing a determined and a well-prepared enemy, they had successfully defended a critical position and maintained control over the strategic area. The decisive repulse of the Pakistani assault at Naushera were more than just a battlefield victory. It was a clear signal of India's resolve to protect its territory and its ability to repel any aggression. In the broader context of the conflict, the victory at Naushera bolstered the morale of the Indian troops and provided a strategic advantage that would influence the subsequent operation in the region. It showcased the Indian Army capability to not only withstand intense pressure but also to deliver a powerful response when needed, ensuring the security of Naushera and its vital surroundings. Now let's take a moment to understand the broader significance of the Battle of Naushera and what this decisive victory meant for the Indian forces and their campaign in the region. Friends, the failure of the Pakistani forces to capture Naushera was not just a tactical defeat for them. It was a significant strategic setback that had far-reaching consequences. Naushera was a critical town for both sides. For the Pakistani forces, capturing Naushera would have meant gaining control over the vital position that could disrupt Indian supply lines and open the way for the further advances into the region. However, their inability to seize these strategic locations preserved Indian control over the Naushera and its crucial road network. By successfully defending Naushera, the Indian forces maintained a stronghold in the area, ensuring that their supply lines and communication routes remained intact. This victory was more than just holding into a piece of land. It was about safeguarding the lifeline that connected various strategic points across Jammu and Kashmir. But the significance of this victory went beyond the immediate tactical gains. The decisive repulse of the Pakistani assault at Naushera set the stage for the further Indian operations in the region, most notably the eventual recapture of nearby town of the Jhangar. Friends, Jhangar, another strategically important location, had fallen into the enemy hands earlier in the conflict, providing the Pakistani forces with a foothold that threatened the Indian positions. But with the victory at Naushera, the Indian army regained the momentum and confidence needed to plan and execute further offensive. It demonstrated their ability to not only defend but also to launch successful operations that could turn the tide of the conflict. The preservation of Naushera as a stronghold provided a critical base from which the Indian forces could launch the offensive to recapture Jhangar, which would be another significant blow to the enemy's strategy. In essence, the Battle of Naushera was a pivotal moment that helped to shift the balance of power in the favor of Indian forces. It showed that despite the challenges and intense opposition, the Indian army was capable of mounting a strong defense and maintaining control over these key strategic areas. The victory not only preserved the integrity of Indian positions but also paved the way for the further successes, reinforcing the overall defense of Jammu and Kashmir. The failure of the Pakistani forces to capture Naushera highlighted the resilience and tactical strength of the Indian troops. It was a reminder that control over strategic town and routes was crucial in this conflict. And as the Indian army was determined to protect its territory and push back against any aggression, this battle was a testament to their resolve and their ability to adapt and respond effectively to any threat, ensuring the security and the stability of the region. Let's discuss one of the critical outcomes of the Battle of Naushera: the heavy casualties inflicted on the Pakistani forces. This was a significant factor in the decisive Indian victory and had a profound impact on the enemy's ability to continue their offensive operations. Throughout the intense fighting around Naushera, the Indian forces not only repelled multiple attacks but also inflicted severe losses on the enemy. The Pakistani troops, despite their repeated attempts to capture their strategic town, faced overwhelming resistance from the well-prepared Indian defenders. The use of armored cars, artillery, and air support by the Indian army created a formidable defense that the enemy could not penetrate. As the battle unfolded, the Indian troops demonstrated exceptional skill and determination, countering every move made by the Pakistani forces with precision and strength. The result was devastating for the attackers. The Pakistani forces suffered heavy casualties, losing a significant number of soldiers and resources in their failed attempt to breach the Indian defense. And these heavy losses had a cascading effect on the enemy's capabilities. With a considerable portion of their fighting force diminished, the Pakistani forces were left weakened and unable to sustain their offensive momentum. Their inability to achieve their objective at Naushera and a heavy toll exacted by the Indian defense meant that their capacity to launch further attack was severely compromised. The heavy casualties also reinforced the decisive nature of the Indian victory in this engagement. Not only did the Indian forces successfully defend Naushera, but they also dealt a crippling blow to the enemy's offensive capabilities. This outcome underscored the strength and effectiveness of Indian army strategy and their readiness to defend their positions against any aggression. In the broader context of the conflict, the heavy losses inflicted on the enemy at Naushera marked a turning point. It showed that Indian forces were not only capable of defending key strategic positions, but also of inflicting substantial damage to any force that threatened their sovereignty. The weakened state of the Pakistani forces following this battle further solidifies the Indian army control over the region and set the stage for subsequent operations. Friends, the Indian defense of Naushera was more than just a tactical victory. It was a demonstration of their resolve and their ability to protect the land. The heavy casualties inflicted on the enemies highlighted the cost of aggression and served as a powerful reminder of the Indian army's strength and determination to defend their territory at all costs. Friends, here we come to the end of part 1 of chapter 6. Friends, please do share, like and subscribe to this channel and stay tuned for more updates. Thank you.